All right, boys and girls. Shout out to testing week, I guess. All right, this is a hard chapter. Shout out to Jacob. Say hi to Jacob.
Hi, Jacob.
See you, Jacob.
Hi, Jacob.
So this is a really hard chapter. It's important that you understand what is hard about it. You're not sorry. You're not. I know. Okay. What's hard about it is the fractions. We were never really good at adding fractions, subtracting fractions, so that's what's hard about it. It also involves factoring, and if you're not good at factoring, then you need to make sure you're coming strong with that John Rick. Okay? Other than that, it's doable. So, here's my list of advice. It is 5 steps. If you're watching this video, you might want to pause the video and copy these pieces of advice down. Read the directions. I know that sounds like completely insulting, but I mean it. In this particular case, you have to know, am I solving or am I simplifying? Okay? Remember that here is the order of the difficulty. Multiplication is easy. You just multiply the top, multiply the bottom. Division is pretty easy too. First, you got to turn your division into multiplying by put your thing down, flip it, and reverse it, or by multiplying by the reciprocal. But then once you do that, it's just the exact same as multiplication. Okay? Addition is hard because you've got to get common denominators. The only thing you're allowed to do to get a common denominator is multiply by 1. Usually it's a fancy form of 1. And subtraction is the hardest because you've got to get a common denominator and you've got to keep your eye out for negatives. Okay? Finally, when you're solving an equation that involves fractions, you're most certainly going to have to cross-multiply. So then in this video, you're going to see all of this stuff in action. Okay, so the first one is certainly going to be a graphing calculator question. Just so you know, this here is going to make it go up 1. And this here is going to make it go actually right 3. So if you wanted to, you could start this by just getting your asymptotes right. That's my right 3. This is my up 1. Okay? My vertical asymptote, let's see, is x equals 3. That's x equals 3. My horizontal asymptote is y equals 1. And then this one doesn't, well, here, let's graph it. Let's graph it now. So y equals clear 2 divided by parentheses x minus 3. Now maybe you want to use your fraction button on your calculator if you have that, which would be great. And then plus 1. Enter. Let's graph it. As you can see, our asymptotes were correct. We've gone up 1 and we've gone right 3. Okay, so I just got to now hit my table up and graph a couple points. 0, comma 1/3. 2, comma negative 1. Let me scroll down and get a couple more. Notice that we have an error where our vertical asymptote is. That's awesome. 4, 3, and 5, 2. 4, 3, and 5, 2. So that gives us an idea what it's going to look like and where. And there we go. Okay. What is the domain? The domain is the terms that we're allowed to put in for our x. So what are we not allowed to put in for our x? We're not allowed to divide by 0. So what value for x when we put it in gives us 0? That's a 3. So x is not allowed to be 3. And our range is our outputs. And notice that this is the only spot where it'll never get to on the y. So y is not allowed to be 1. Notice this. The domain and the range are directly related to the asymptotes. There are no holes in this one. The holes take place wherever you cancel something. And you might have to check out one of the older videos for that one. And we're moving on. Okay, so now let's read the directions. Simplify. There's no equal sign on this one. Make sure to factor first. These are some nice directions. So, looking for two numbers that multiply to be -6 and add to be +1. Keep in mind, there's a 1 there and there's a 1 there if you're John Ricking this. Okay? Thank you. X plus 3. Very good, Noah. X minus 2. And on the bottom, two numbers that multiply to be -27 and add to be -6. It's going to be a -9 times +3. Okay? This cancels with that because anything divided by itself is 1. And then you're going to get, for the answer, x minus 2 divided by x minus 9. And if you're wondering, do I need those parentheses? I don't, but it doesn't hurt to write them. Okay? All right, number 5. We're still in multiplication, and this one's a little bit different. This has been helping people, so I'm going to write it like this. 3r n times 20 t. Okay? All divided by 5t times 9r n. Okay, first let's simplify the numbers. I can divide both those by 5. Do you see how I did that? What can I divide 3 and 9 by? I can divide both of those by 3. Okay? I can get rid of 2 r's from the top, leaving me with 1 r on the bottom. I can get rid of 2 t's from the top and 2 t's from the bottom. The t's are gone. And I can do that. Okay? If you remember your rules from exponents that you're just subtracting, that's fine. You don't have to do it this way. I'm just making it clear for everybody. So what we have left on the top is 4 times 1. We have n squared. And what we have left on the bottom is 3r. Okay, moving on. Still multiplication. This is great. This is another type of factoring, and we often struggle with this. How do we factor 3m squared minus 3m? Well, what do both terms contain? They both contain an m, and they both contain a 3. So what's left? What's 3m times what is m cubed? M squared. That's going to be minus 1, actually. Okay? And that's going to be, watch, that's going to be a tricky one. So stay tuned. Times 4m, m, all over 6m, m. times m plus 1. Now, does anyone see something that we can still factor? This is called a difference of squares. Two numbers that multiply to be -1 and add to be 0. What is that? It's m plus 1 times m minus 1. Do you remember that? Do you see that? So there, I've factored that and turned it into that. And now we can do a lot of canceling. Because the m plus 1 is going to cancel with the m plus 1. And these 4 m's are going to cancel with these 4 m's. We're going to have 1 m left. Oh, we're going to have another m here, but we'll get to that. Sorry. The 3 and the 6 turns into a 1/2. And that's it. We have nothing else left to cancel on the bottom. So what we get is 1 times m times 4 times m over 2. So that is, oh, we can still cancel that, huh? That's 1 and a 2. So you end up with 2m squared. How about that? Whoops. Whoops. 2. Come on now. M squared. That's your final answer. Now look, the nice thing is this is not a multiple choice test. So like if you got all of this right but didn't factor it, you'd still get 3 out of 4 points, right? So show all your work is what I'm telling you. Show your work, show your work, show your work. On to number 9, and now we're on to division. And when you divide by a fraction, you multiply by its inverse. So the first thing you do is you just rewrite this question as a multiplication question. That's why it's just one step harder. Now this one's super tough because it's all letters. Does anyone know how to factor a squared minus b squared? Take a guess. We just did it. Yes, very good. Liz? Okay. Alright, so you got a plus b times a minus b times 2a all over, I'm just rewriting the order. Sweet. You cannot. You got to factor it first. You can only cancel things that are being multiplied. So the only reason we can cancel this is that it's equal to 1. So that's gone because something divided by itself is 1. The a's are gone. Very good, Luca. The 2 is gone. It becomes a 1. And the 4 becomes a 2. So indeed, you get a minus b divided by 2. Okay? All right. Now on to the harder ones. Adding fractions. What do you wish this denominator was? Yeah, don't you wish it was x plus 2? So what do we need to multiply this by to make both of those positive? We need to multiply it by a -1. But if we multiply the bottom by a -1, we got to multiply the top by a -1. You don't have to do anything to this one. Just rewrite it. And you can see we've left you a lot of room on this test because you need a lot of room to do these right. All right, so if you multiply each by -1, you get a -4 minus 9x on top. And on the bottom, what do you get? X plus 2. And then remember, this is what we were bad at in the first place. But just remind me, what's 1/4 plus 1/4? It's not 1/8. It's 2/4. It's a half, right? 2 quarters. 2 quarters make a half. right? That's literally why they call them quarters. Okay? All right, so when we do this, we just got to do 7 plus 3x minus 4 minus 9x all over x plus 2. And now we just got to simplify. So 7 minus 4 is 3. 3x minus 9x is minus 6x. Oh no, this is not my final answer. This is not my final answer. I don't think. Yes, yes it is. Yes it is.
So when you're multiplying by the -1, you have to do that on the fraction to the right.
Correct. You do not need to multiply the entire thing by the same thing because this is not an equation. That I'm just learning, like, even though this is my 20th year of teaching, I think that's what the confusion is. When you have an equation, you have to multiply everything by the same thing. But when you're just trying to get the denominators to be alike, all you got to do is multiply by some version of 1. I mean, maybe someone would want to write this like 3 times 1 minus 2x over x plus 2, but I don't need you to do that. I don't need you to do that. I'm just saying those would both be equally good answers. All right. Now, no, we're going to have to multiply each of these by 1. What's the one on the right missing? It doesn't have a g, so we need to multiply that by g over g. What's the one on the left missing? It's missing 1h to make it h squared. Very good. And did we do anything to change the outcome of this problem? We did not, because all we did was multiply by 1. So you get 7h over 4 g h squared plus 3g over 4gh squared. The lines disappeared on the practice test. Don't worry about it, the lines anyway. So what is that? You end up getting 7h plus 3g over 4gh squared. Now, my experience tells me that you guys are going to make this a little bit more complicated. Like some of you are going to try to add the 7 and the 3 and make that 10hg, but you can't. Like remember that 7x plus 5y, there's nothing you can do to that. They're not like terms. You can't turn that addition into multiplication. So this indeed is the final answer. Others are going to try to cancel, like we've been canceling, you know? So you're going to like see the G and you're going to want to cancel those, but you can't because of the addition sign. And if you're wondering, like, why are those the rules? Like, who made these rules? They're not rules. They're just how the numbers work because of order of operations. So, like, if you had 3 plus 4 divided by 4, the answer is definitely not 3. Right? It is not 3. It's definitely not 3. The answer is 7/4. So if you get confused on a test, you should ask yourself a question like that. Because you'd probably understand the numbers. You just get confused with the letters. We're almost done. Okay? Ooh, this one's hard. So now, if you don't know how to get a common denominator, then factor. So use your John Rick or use your wonderful brains. What two numbers that multiply to be 1 and add to be 2? You can do it. That's right. 1 and 1. Okay? Multiply to be 1 and add to be 2. And this is x over x plus 1. So now we realize, what is the fraction on the right missing? It's missing an x plus 1. Very good. And I'm only allowed to multiply by 1. So that's the version of 1 that I multiply by. So we are left with 1. I'll rewrite the whole thing. Excellent, Luca. Thank you. Okay? So then the best way to write this is x squared plus 1x plus 1 over x plus 1 times x plus 1. Final answer. Yes, Liz. You can't. That's actually not factorable. If it was and you did, you would be equally as right as me. Not any better, not any worse. But there are no two numbers that multiply to be 1 and add to be 1. So you'd have to, it'd be ugly. It'd be imaginary probably. Two more. All right, so this one is solve. And what was my last piece of advice? When you have to solve, be prepared to cross multiply. You can't cross multiply until you get this to be a fraction. It's currently not a fraction, it's two fractions. So what do we need to multiply this by so that we can subtract them? We need to multiply by 2 over 2. Very good, Luca. Don't worry about the right side. So that leaves you 4x over 6 minus x plus 3 over 6 equals 2. This is weird. This is bad math here. Think about that in parentheses. I think a lot of us would have gotten that little piece wrong. You get 4x minus x minus 3 over 6 equals 2. What's 4x minus 1x? So you get 3x minus 3 over 6 equals 2 over 1. Now you cross multiply. You could factor and simplify this thing, but I don't even want you to. It doesn't even save you any time. Cross multiply. So you get 6 times 2. I'll write it out. 6 times 2 is 3x minus 3 times 1. 12 is 3x minus 3. Add 3. 15 is 3x. And indeed, x is 5. Let's check our answer. What's 2 times 5? So 10 thirds minus, what's 5 plus 3? 8/6 equals 2. Open up our calculator. Let's just have it. Clear. Second that. Nope. Doesn't have it. No problem. Mode. Oh gosh. Alright, so let's just do this. 10 divided by 3 minus 8 divided by 6 equals 2. We got it right. So you can, if you have enough time, you can check these and make sure you got it right. If you didn't get it right, you probably just made a little mistake. And we've got one more. Appreciate your patience. Did I circle my answer? Yes. X equals 5. All right, let's factor. 1 over x plus 3 plus 5 over x minus x squared minus 9 would be x plus 3 times x minus 3. Okay. I don't need to get a common denominator over here, which is a question that's similar to the one that Noah asked earlier. I only have to worry about the left side to start. So I'm going to multiply this by x minus 3 over x minus 3, because that's what it's missing on the bottom. So then you get x minus 3 over x minus 3 times x plus 3 plus 5 over x minus 3 times x plus 3 equals 2 over x minus 3. Okay, what's a negative 3 plus 5? That's a positive 2, right? So that this top turns into x plus 2 over x minus 3. Okay? And now we're going to cross multiply. Just write everything out in parentheses, because look, things are going to cancel. So you got x plus 2 times x minus 3 equals 2 times x minus 3 times x plus 3. Alright. Both sides have an x minus 3, right? So if you divide both sides by x minus 3, that cancels them. And you're left with x plus 2 equals 2x plus 3. Subtract x from both sides. Subtract 3 from both sides. And you get x equals negative 1. Let's test it. I'm going to stop the video. You should test it. Make sure you're right on the test. That's a long enough video. Thanks for bearing with me. Boom!